The setting sun shines down on Fifth Avenue, dyeing the skyscrapers a brilliant orange. Marcus Sterling, 45 years old, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, just walked out of the company building after a stressful day of work. The Rolex on his wrist reflects the sunlight, while his $10,000 tailored Armani suit remains wrinkle-free even after a long day. His daily habit is to stop at Le Bernardin, the most luxurious French restaurant in New York, where his wife, Isabella, often books a table for 2 people. However, today, something was different that made Marcus feel uneasy. During 15 years of marriage, this was the first time Isabella Nastoychevo asked him to be on time, even texting him 3 times to remind him. As Marcus strode on the luxurious sidewalk, a homeless boy about 12 years old suddenly rushed towards him. His dirty brown hair fell over his thin face. His big blue eyes sparkled with panic. "Don't eat!" the boy shouted, his voice shaking with worry. "Your wife! She put poison in the food!" Marcus stood stunned, feeling as if a bucket of cold water had just been poured on him. The noise of New York City seemed to fade into the distance, leaving only the pounding heartbeat in his chest. The familiar smell of Isabella's Chanel No. 5 perfume wafted through her mind, now suddenly becoming strangely suffocating. "Boy, what are you talking about?" Marcus bent down, trying to stay calm even though his hands were starting to tremble. The musty smell from the boy's tattered clothes filled his nose, but Marcus did not feel uncomfortable. The boy's clear blue eyes exuded strange sincerity. I heard it." The boy gulped, his voice getting softer. "This morning, in an alley near the restaurant, she talked to a strange man. They discussed the plan to poison him. I heard him clearly. Everything." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. Memories of Isabella in recent months flooded back. The secret phone calls, the unexpected business trips, and most recently, her urging him to sign a new life insurance policy worth $50 million. All those strange things now seem to have answers. "How do you know that's my wife?" Marcus asked, trying to control the trembling that spread throughout his body. "I live on the street, sir." The boy shrugged. "I know everyone in this area. I've seen her go to that restaurant many times. Today she's different. She's wearing a red dress and gloves. Black hands and..." Marcus felt his blood freeze. Isabella had indeed texted him this morning, saying she would wear his favorite red dress to dinner. The small details that this homeless boy knows make the story even more terrifying. The honking of car horns from the streets of Manhattan serves as a reminder that time is still passing. Marcus looked at his watch, 7:55 p.m. 5 minutes left until booking time. Isabella was probably waiting for him in the restaurant, with a glass of her favorite red wine and maybe even poison. Nausea rose in his throat as Marcus remembered Isabella's goodbye kiss this morning. Her lips were still as sweet as always, but now that sweetness suddenly turned bitter. The familiar scent of her perfume, the scent he once loved, now felt like a dagger in his heart. "Thank you." Marcus took out a wad of money from his wallet and gave it to the boy. "This is really important to me." The boy shook his head, not accepting the money. "I don't need the money, sir. I just don't want to see someone die when I can prevent it. My mother died of poisoning. I don't want that to happen to someone else." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The boy's story is not only a warning, but also a painful echo from the past. He looked toward Le Bernardin restaurant, where warm lights shone from high glass windows. Isabella was there, the woman he had trusted with his life, the one who had shared his most beautiful years with him, and maybe the one who was plotting to end his life. The cold air of Manhattan penetrated his skin, but it did nothing to cool the fever burning inside Marcus. He had to make a decision. Face this painful truth, or continue living in a sweet illusion. The bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral rang out 8 times, as if urging him for an answer. Marcus picked up the phone, his hands shaking, and dialed the number of Greg Thompson, his best friend, and also a New York police detective. While he waited, he could hear his heart pounding. Each ring of the bell seemed to last forever. "Marcus, what's going on?" Greg's voice rang out after 3 rings. "Greg, I need your help." Marcus lowered his voice, glanced around. "Can you check Isabella's call and text history?" The other end of the line was silent for a moment. "Marcus, what's going on?" Marcus recounts everything, from the homeless boy's warning to Isabella's recent unusual events. His voice choked when mentioning the life insurance policy. "Wait for me 15 minutes, Greg said, his voice becoming serious. "Don't go into the restaurant. Wait around the corner." Marcus found a hidden corner near Le Bernardin restaurant, where he could observe the entrance without being detected. From here, he saw Isabella enter the restaurant in a bright red dress, just as the boy had described. Her black hair was tied up in a neat bun, revealing the slender neck that Marcus had once loved so much. Her black gloved hand clutched her purse. Marcus's phone vibrated. Message from Isabella. "I'm waiting for you. Don't leave me alone for too long." Marcus's hand trembled as he typed back, "I'm stuck in traffic. I might be a little late. I've already ordered for both of you. It's your favorite appetizer." Marcus felt his throat dry. 15 years of marriage, Isabella knew his every dietary preference. Is it love, or just a way for her to carry out her plans? The phone rang again, this time from Greg. "Marcus, you need to hear this. Isabella has had multiple calls to an unknown number in the past 3 months. The number is registered to Michael Torres, a former prisoner who was in prison for murder by poison. He was just released 6 months ago." Marcus's heart seemed to stop beating. A cold sweat ran down his spine as he remembered how Isabella had repeatedly mentioned wanting to go to culinary school in recent months. "I want to cook your favorite dishes," she had said, with a sweet smile that was now scary in Marcus's memory. "Also," Greg continued, "Isabella withdrew a large sum of money from her private account last week. $50,000. The entire amount went to Torres." Marcus felt his knees shaking. He leaned against the cold brick wall, trying to keep his balance. The fragrant smell of baking bread from a nearby restaurant made the nausea increase. "Marcus?" Greg's voice sounded worried. "I have dispatched a special task force there. They will arrive within 5 minutes. Don't do anything foolish." But Marcus couldn't wait any longer. "You must know the truth." Faced with Isabella, looked into her eyes and searched for signs of the woman he had loved for the past 15 years. Or perhaps that woman never existed. He entered Le Bernardin, where the luxurious atmosphere was embellished with melodious classical music. Isabella sat at the familiar table by the window, where they had spent countless happy evenings. The candlelight danced across her beautiful face, creating mysterious shadows in her deep brown eyes. "I thought you wouldn't come anymore." Isabella smiled, the familiar smile that Marcus once loved. "I've already ordered the appetizer. It will be brought out soon." Marcus sat down, feeling the familiar scent of his wife's perfume mixed with the scent of red wine in her glass. Another glass of wine was already poured for him. The dark red color of wine under candlelight suddenly became strangely scary, Are you unwell? Isabella leaned forward, looking worried. You look so pale. Isabella. Marcus swallowed. Do you have anything to hide from me? Isabella's smile faded. For a moment, Marcus saw something flash in her eyes. Panic? Or is it a sin? I don't understand what you mean, she said, her voice shaking slightly. What's wrong, Marcus? Who is Michael Torres? This time, there was no mistaking it. Isabella's face turned pale in an instant. Her gloved fingers tightened around the wine glass. You investigated me? Her voice trembled. What did you pay him $50,000 for? Marcus continued, trying to keep his voice calm even though his heart was beating like it was about to explode. To learn how to mix potions? Isabella suddenly stood up, her chair squeaking on the wooden floor. The surrounding guests began to look in their direction. Tears sparkled in the corners of her eyes, but Marcus no longer knew whether they were real or fake. I can explain, she whispered, her voice choked, but not here. At that moment, the waiter brought over the appetizer, a plate of pan-seared scallops with Marcus's favorite orange sauce. A seductive aroma emanated from the dish, but in Marcus's eyes, it was just like a perfectly disguised poison. Please enjoy, the waiter said politely. Marcus looked at Isabella, then down at the plate of food. In that moment, it seemed like the whole world was left with only the sound of my own heartbeat. His decision in this moment could be the difference between life and death. I beg you, Isabella whispered. Don't do this. But Marcus had no other choice. He pulled out his phone and dialed Greg's number. Come in, he said briefly. Within seconds, the special forces stormed the restaurant. Chaos erupted as diners panicked. Isabella stood there, tears rolling down her cheeks, but not looking surprised. Instead, her lips slightly curled up in a strange smile. The cold New York Police Department interrogation room was bathed in pale fluorescent light. Marcus stood behind the one-way glass, watching Isabella sit motionless in the metal chair. Her bright red dress now looked like a bloodstain under the unfriendly light, and her black gloves had been confiscated as evidence. She hasn't said anything yet? Marcus asked Greg, his voice hoarse. Not yet, Greg shook his head. But the lab has preliminary results on the food sample. They found traces of thallium, a tasteless, colorless, extremely dangerous toxin. Dosage in scallops enough to cause death within 48 hours. Marcus felt his legs tremble. He pulled a nearby chair and sat down, trying not to let himself collapse. The smell of cold coffee from Greg's cup wafted through the air, mixed with the distinctive smell of disinfectant of the police station. Torres testified. Greg continued. He admitted to selling the poison to Isabella. But there's something wrong, Marcus. He said Isabella not only asked to buy the poison, but also asked how to detect and cure the poison. Marcus raised his head and looked at Greg with surprised eyes. What are you talking about? I'm not sure, Greg sighed. But I think we should let Isabella explain. She agreed to talk, but only with you. Marcus entered the interrogation room, his footsteps echoing on the cold floor. Isabella looked up at him, her eyes red but without tears. I trusted a homeless child more than you. That was the first thing she said, her voice painful. 15 years, Marcus. 15 years of marriage, and you didn't give me a chance to explain. You bought the poison, Isabella. Marcus sat down opposite his wife. You put it in my food. What else is there to explain? Isabella smiled bitterly. Have you ever wondered why I chose a public restaurant with full security cameras to carry out my plot? Why did I constantly remind you to come on time, when could poison you at any time at home? Marcus was silent. Indeed, he had never thought of these things. I've been investigating Michael Torres for 3 months, Isabella continued. I followed him, learned about him, and finally approached him. I did all of this to save you. Save me? Marcus frowned. From what? No one is really trying to poison you. Isabella lowered her voice. Susan Sterling. My sister. Marcus felt like someone had just hit him in the face. Susan, his only sister, whom he has taken care of since his parents died, and whom he entrusts with the position of CFO of the company. You're crazy! Marcus shook his head. Susan, never. 2 months ago, Isabella interrupted, I discovered suspicious transactions in the company's books. Susan had withdrawn millions of dollars through shell companies. She was preparing for a scandal. Big embezzlement. But she knows you'll find out soon, so she was going to kill you? Marcus felt a lump in his throat. Do you have proof? Isabella nodded. I hired a detective to follow her. Susan contacted Torres 2 weeks before me. She ordered another toxin, arsenic. I knew I had to do something, but I couldn't say it directly. With you, I know you will never believe me without concrete evidence. So why did you buy poison from Torres? To win his trust? Isabella sighed. I need him to believe that I'm also an accomplice, so he can reveal Susan's plan. I recorded it all. As for dinner tonight, she paused for a moment. I had it all planned out. I knew Susan would take action today. The company's anniversary, when everyone would think it was just an unfortunate sudden death of a CEO at an important party. But the thallium in the dish. It's proof. Isabella looked straight into Marcus's eyes. I added a small amount, enough to detect in a test, but not enough to cause harm. I need the police to intervene to catch Susan red-handed as she carried out her plan. I tried to contact Greg, but you were 1 step faster than me. Marcus felt dizzy. Pieces of the story began to fit together. Isabella's secret phone calls were with the detective and Torres, unscheduled business trips to keep an eye on Susan, new insurance policy, a way to ensure the company doesn't fall into Susan's hands if something bad happens. Homeless boy, Marcus suddenly remembered. How did you know he would warn me? A sad smile appeared on Isabella's lips. Tommy is not homeless. He is the son of the detective I hired. I knew you would believe an innocent child more than you would believe me in this situation. I was right. Maybe too right. At that moment, Greg suddenly opened the door and walked in. Marcus, we just caught Susan at the restaurant. She was trying to change your plate. We found arsenic in her system. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling like his whole world was collapsing. The scent of Isabella's perfume, the scent he once thought was poison, is now like a string pulling him back to reality. A week later, Marcus stood at the window of his office on the 50th floor of the Sterling Enterprises building, looking down at New York City glowing in the sunset. The events of the past week still echoed in his mind like a nightmare. Susan's confession of her guilt, the discovery of documents about illegal transactions, and the shock of the entire staff. Company when it learns the truth. The fragrant smell of coffee wafted from the cup cooling on the table. Marcus no longer dared to drink anything without mixing it himself. That was one of the consequences of learning that his sister had planned to poison him. Trust, once broken, cannot be easily repaired. A gentle knock on the door rang out. Come in, Marcus said, without turning around. He knew it was Isabella. He had memorized her knock on the door after 15 years of marriage. "I brought you a new financial report," Isabella said, her voice soft. "After eliminating Susan's illegal transactions, we are still stable." Marcus turned around, looking at the woman he had almost lost faith in. Isabella is still as beautiful as ever, but something has changed. Perhaps it was her eyes, older, more mature after what she had been through. "You don't have to work this late," Marcus said. "You should go home and rest." Isabella smiled sadly. "Home? I don't even know if I can still call it home." Marcus felt his heart sink. Over the past week, they have hardly talked to each other outside of work. He slept in the living room, and Isabella worked late into the night and came home in silence. The distance between them seemed farther than ever, despite the fact that Isabella had saved his life. "I'm sorry." Marcus finally said these words. "I didn't trust you." "I understand." Isabella put the file down on the table. "In that situation, maybe I would do the same thing as you." "No, I don't understand." Marcus walked closer to his wife. "I betrayed your trust. In 15 years of marriage, you have never disappointed me. Yet just because of a warning from a strange boy, I doubted you." "Tommy is a very good child actor." Isabella laughed softly. "I paid the boy $100 for that act." "But the story about the boy's mother, it's true," Isabella nodded. "That's why I chose the boy. His pain is real, and that makes the warning more believable." Marcus shook his head, impressed by the thoughtfulness of his wife's plan. "You were too reckless." "I have no other choice." Isabella looked straight into her husband's eyes. "Susan is too smart and careful. If you tell me directly, she will have a way to cover everything up. You need to create a situation so the police can catch you. Mourn her." "And I bet my own life." Marcus grabbed his wife's hand. "If you don't trust that boy, if you don't call Greg, then I have a plan B." Isabella smiled. "I've sent someone to monitor Susan. As soon as she tries to change your plate, they will intervene." Marcus pulled Isabella into his arms, inhaling deeply her familiar scent, the scent that last week he even thought was poison. "I don't deserve you." "Don't say that." Isabella wrapped her arms around her husband. "Love is not about being worthy or not. It's about what we are willing to do to protect the one we love." The sunset light outside the window has turned dark purple. The lights of Manhattan began to sparkle like stars, creating a breathtakingly beautiful scene. Marcus remembered the first time he brought Isabella to this office when they first fell in love. She stood in this exact spot, looking at the city, and said this was the most beautiful view she had ever seen. "Do you remember?" Marcus whispered. "The first day you came here?" Isabella nodded, tears sparkling in the corners of her eyes. "I still remember it clearly. You promised to show me this view every day. And now it's mine." Marcus took out a file from the drawer. "I have appointed you as the company's new chief financial officer." Isabella looked at her husband in surprise. "But I don't have experience." "I discovered illegal transactions that our entire audit team overlooked." Marcus smiled. "You're smart, careful, and, most importantly, you're honest. The company needs people like you. Aren't you afraid people will say you're biased?" "I don't care." Marcus shrugged. "I learned a valuable lesson from this. Sometimes people need to trust their heart more than their logical mind." Isabella picked up the document, but did not open it. Instead, she looked out the window. where New York City was engulfed in shimmering darkness. "I love you, Marcus. I will never betray this trust." "I know." Marcus squeezed his wife's hand. "And from now on, I will never doubt that again." They stood there in the high office, where they could see the whole city glowing with lights. Below, life keeps moving. Yellow taxis, hurried pedestrians, and somewhere, perhaps a boy playing a new role in the play of life. That night, when they got home, Marcus didn't sleep in the living room anymore. In each other's arms, they regained the trust they had almost lost. Because sometimes, love isn't just about trust. It's also about forgiveness and second chances.